Hello and welcome to another episode of LGOtv Big Talk. And why Big Talk? You know, because I hate small talk. Now, for those of you who are watching live, it is election day in this country. For those of you who are watching later, don't stop listening because we are not going to talk politics. I think a lot of us need a distraction today. And so I carefully planned my guest today to have nothing to do with politics. Because at the end of the day, why are we involved in politics? Because we all want to live our lives. And Melissa Wiggins, who is my guest today, is all about life, and not just life, like living the biggest life you can. Melissa's career started as a solicitor in Edinburgh, Scotland. You'll hear that when you hear her lovely accent today. But when her first son was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer, right about the time when she was about to give birth to twins, her full-time calling changed from being a lawyer to being a warrior for her son, for making sure that her son got the treatment that he needed. And she not only had to fight for that, she had to fight for that within a world where only 5% of the research for cancer goes to pediatric cancer. So she really had to be that advocate. When she was in that process, she and her husband, Michael, created Cannonball Kids Cancer Foundation, which is a cancer research nonprofit. She has spoken on stages around the world, from the Glasgow Children's Hospital to AT&T Stadium in San Francisco, and even Dick Vitale's living room. You know, Dick Vitale, ESPN, March Madness fame. She is incredible. She is so much fun. She is going to talk to us today about how you find your voice, how you find your roar, how you find that confidence to fight for the things that you believe in. And she's going to talk to us all about that journey of helping save her son, of raising her 4 boys, of adopting her daughter, Charlie, that she and her husband just completed the adoption of in November of last year. So Melissa, welcome to Big Talk.
To be here.
I'm so excited to have you.
I'm very excited to be here. Thank you. I'm honored, truly. I looked at your guest list and I was like, I'm not sure why I'm on this list, but I appreciate it.
Well, you were on this list because you're a warrior, because you're a fighter. I wanted to do this show. Really, what I was doing was I was like, I need to do the research for my upcoming book, Wonder Hell. And if I have to have the conversations, I might as well have them live and have other people join in. And the idea of Wonder Hell is this concept of the moment you realize you were meant for something more, that maybe you set your goals too low, that maybe there's more in this life that you have. It's amazing. It's incredible. It's humbling. It's wonderful. And also, you've never been so friggin' tired in your entire life. It's overwhelming. It's scary. It's riddled with anxiety. It's hell. It's wonder hell. And as I was thinking about people who I wanted to profile in the book, your story, your mama bear story was like, oh, clearly that's got to be included. So take us back to that moment. You're pregnant with twins and you're like, I got everything. I got this great job. I got this great husband. I got a beautiful 4-year-old boy. I'm about to have twins. Life is great.
Yeah, and it was, and I remember calling my mom in Scotland and saying, do you ever get that feeling when life is so good, but you're a little bit scared because it just feels a little bit too good? Like, I remember being there, and Cannon was 20 months old and I was a whale. And I'm not saying that, like, I was humongous. I was like 198 pounds, huge, massive belly, and, complete martyr mother, like taking Cannon to Disney, on top of like holding him on top of my huge belly. And, I wanted to, like you said, like live life to the max. Like, being pregnant with twins was not going to be an excuse, quote unquote, to like not go have fun with this other beautiful baby I have. And he started limping, and they said, like, bring him in, check him out. And of course, I was pregnant, so I couldn't even go in the x-ray room with the kid. So they take him in and they do this x-ray, and they said, I think he might have an infection in his knee, so we're going to do a little surgery. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I'm going to have a kid in a cast. I'm going to have twin babies. Like, this is awful. And, then that spiraled very quickly to, actually he has cancer, stage 4 neuroblastoma.
I got the fact wrong. So he was 20 months old. He wasn't 4.
Yeah.
He wasn't even 2 years old.
He wasn't even 2.
And the diagnosis
was my first child, like my firstborn child, like new mom, 20 months old, living in a different country without my family. And yeah, my husband was out of town. Like he traveled for work, which he still does. And I was like, you're going to have to come home. And 10 days later, I was across, like there was like a bridge between the baby hospital and the kids hospital. And I was giving birth to the twins, and my husband and Cannon were on the same floor on the other side in the ICU, and he was having his first chemotherapy.
Oh my goodness. At the same time, how did you, I don't even know I don't even know what question to ask about this. How did you manage that? Were you present in the birth, or were you there? You were on the other side of the hospital.
I think like one day the twins were going to see an interview of me saying this, but honestly, like I really didn't want that much to do with them. God bless their hearts. I love them now. But like all I had ever known was Cannon, right? It was me and Cannon, like we're buds, like him and I against the world. And I gave birth to them, and I like breastfed them, and I made them wheelchair me back over to him because I had a C-section, because like who gives birth to twins vaginally? Not me. And so like they wheelchaired me back over to him, and then he wanted nothing to do with me, Laura. He was so pissed that I had left him that he was like, no, bye, Felicia. Like and so that was just a nightmare, you know, again, just that. But I hadn't, from the day he was diagnosed until the night before I gave birth to the twins, I had not left his side. And then my doctor and my husband were like, they cornered me, and they're like, you're going home to shower, and you're going to sleep in a bed that is not a side of the hospital. Because I used to have to like stand like this aside of the crib that he was in. And of course my legs were this size from like just standing. And they said, you got to go home and have a shower and go give birth to these twins. And then, you know, the twins spent the first 3.5 years of their life traveling around the country, being in different hospitals, like coming to mama for boobies, leaving. Like that was our relationship, you know?
Wow. So I actually had an unplanned C-section for my first, and then a planned C-section for my second. And I'll tell you, it was pretty hard, and I wasn't managing a kid with stage 4 cancer. I mean, and you know, here's the thing about the whole like childbirth thing is that you know, you carry this human inside of you, and then the person comes out, and you know, and there's some people who are like, it was amazing, the angels sang and the rainbows were there and it was beautiful and the sunshine. And I was like, that wasn't my experience. I was like, what the hell just happened to me? And then they hand you this person, and you're expected to love them like as if you've known them their whole lives, and meanwhile they're like a total stranger. You're like, who is this like leech? What am I supposed to do? And it's so hard. So like if your mind is somewhere else, your heart is somewhere else, and you're giving birth, it's really hard to be present in that moment. So, you know, I'm sure that the twins will watch interviews of you one day saying this, but I feel like until you've gone through that experience, it's really hard to get it, to really understand it. And yet, you know, when my second one was born, I remember he came out and he was like a little on the colder side, and he was like, I don't know, 92 degrees or something. And then all of a sudden my temperature dropped really low. So they put these heat lamps on us, and we laid there like naked with heat lamps on us. And it was so lovely. And then they were like, we're going to put him in the NICU for a while. And of course, there I am with the C-section. I was like, what? Take me to my child. I need to see him. And I go to the NICU, and there's my like perfectly normal, you know, human size 38 week of pregnancy baby next to these like teeny tiny preemies. And I was like, the kid's going to be fine.
Fine. We're good.
I'm done. So at what point in this process were you like, okay, forget the career, this is the new thing that we're doing? Or did it evolve over time as you realized that there actually weren't the kinds of pediatric cancer treatments that were available to kids?
I think once I realized it was going to be a very long process, it wasn't like he was going to go through 3 rounds of chemo and boom, you're done. This wasn't that type of cancer. And like 80% of kids diagnosed, it's stage 4, which is just awful. So most of the kids diagnosed these days, it's everywhere. Cannon's scan lit up like a Christmas tree. Like literally there was just tumors all over him. And they said, you know, he has a 50-50 chance, and you're gonna have to really fight. a lot of kids don't make it, and this is going to be really hard, and it's going to be years of battling. And I think in that moment, it was just like a no-brainer. Okay, I'm ready. Let's go. I got 50. I'll take 50. I'm taking that to the bank, right? Like, I'm going. But I knew that would require me researching and finding different trials and taking them different places. And, you know, my husband made way more money than I did at the time. So I was like, okay, you do this and get us insurance, and I'll do this. So I closed down my business, and I, you know, just became his full-time caretaker. And I found the trials and the surgeons and the families, and it just sort of evolved from Canon to Cannonball Kids Cancer.
And so when they said 50-50 chance, you're really going to need to fight, I've always thought that was really interesting. Like when people were like, she's fighting for her life, he's fighting for his life. At a certain point, I don't even know what that means. Like you make like a decision that you're going to live, and then it's like you do like one extra, you know, lap around the hospital wing or whatever it is you need to do. But when it's not you as the patient, it's your 20-month-old, you can't tell them how to fight, right? It has to be you. It has to be you not taking no for an answer when you're researching and you're finding the treatments and you're trying to get there. Were you always somebody who didn't take no for an answer? Were you always somebody who had this, you know,
yes,
in you?
I think most Scottish people are. I don't know if you've ever met a weak Scottish person. Like, it's like an inbred thing in us. I was joking around when I was talking with Brant Menswar. I was like, we don't have feelings. You keep your tears for your pillowcase. You know, like that's just sort of how you're raised. Not saying it's right, just saying that's how we go in Scotland. And so I looked at it, and my husband looked at it like we're Cannon's cheerleaders, right? He's the quarterback. I'm the cheerleader. I'm the coach. Like, I'm going to be the one that when he needs it, I'm going to cheer him on. When he doesn't know what direction to go, I'll be the coach. And so I never ever went into like the pity party of like, woo, woo, this is my kid. Like, this is so sad. I was like, we got too much to do to figure out to go there. I did that way later. That was like last week at therapy. Like in the moment, like with Cannon, it was just, we got to just figure it out. And Laura, we had so many decisions to make. You know, do you do radiation on the leg? Do you not do it? Do you do surgery at Memorial Sloan Kettering? Do you do it locally? Like, do you do this clinical trial? Do you not? There was huge decisions. And, you know, thankfully he's a survivor. I think we made good decisions, but it was not easy.
So how'd you make the decisions? I mean, I read your bio. There was no medical degree in there. There's no cancer research degree.
You know, what we did was, you know, because my husband and I are both lawyers, we're very good at doing research, right? Like that's research. And so we would go off in our separate ways, and we would do our own research, and then we'd come back together and we'd be like, this is the decision I've made and this is the decision you've made. And we would both always be the same every single time. And so that's how we made the decisions going forward for Cannon. But it was tough.
Do you see that a lot in all the families that you're working with, that the parents are united in the path forward?
No.
That's got to be pretty hard in addition to everything else.
I can.
Yeah. That's, I would think that'd be pretty rough because, you know, it's, it's kind of a funny thing. I never call my husband during the workday. Normally he trades bonds. And so he's, you know, in the middle of calling 15 different, you know, banks on Wall Street all day long. And we used to joke around, like I texted him when my water broke with my first kid. Like there was no reason to call him, like nobody was dead. And actually he's called me a few times over the course of our 25 years to your marriage. And usually I'll pick up the phone and I'm like, who died? And he'll say something like your grandmother, right? Like it's just, we just don't talk on the phone. But there was a moment when one of our sons was facing a health issue, and I picked up the phone. I was like, you're going to have to come here. Like I can't make this decision about whether or not he has surgery or not by myself. And I think that there are so many families where they really are having to face this on their own. So, you know, I know that you spend a lot of time working with families and working with women in particular on finding their roar. So what does the roar look like?
I think, you know, when Cannon was diagnosed, I have some stories that like make my stomach turn now, where I truly, I didn't want the doctors to think poorly of me. I was very concerned with what they would say about me, what they would think about me, what they would think about my choices. And I remember in particular, one doctor said, "You're an idiot if you put your kid on this trial." And I remember, Laura, just eating my lunch, like literally eating my lunch, but it didn't eat it enough that I didn't do it. I still did it. And I think like that's the difference, right? You're still going to feel some of these, it doesn't feel great, I don't love it that they don't like what I'm doing, but you still have to do it. And I believe like that trial saved Cannon's life. And now it's actually a part of the upfront treatment. But at the time, there wasn't that much saying this is really going to work. But the things I read was enough for me. Like, this is a chance I'm going to take. And I think finding your roar, becoming a mama bear, is learning to let go of the opinions of other people. That cozy blanket we wrap ourselves up at night of other people's opinions.
Yes.
It gets scratchy eventually, right? Those cozy blankets get scratchy and they don't feel so good anymore. And it's like we wake up as women and one day we're like, why don't I feel good? Like, why doesn't this feel right? It's because you've been living your life for Sue up the street, like not yourself, right? And so I started to really let go of the opinions of doctors and other people and really learn how to do that. And so that's like what I try to do whenever I'm like coaching with women is like, what does Melissa want to do? Like, what does Laura want to do? Not your husband, not your mom, you know, not your mother-in-law. What do you want to do? And it's finding that. And that was like me finding my roar, like my voice.
Well, I appreciate you having the little placement of my book back there in the corner. That's pretty, it's pretty awesome. Because, you know, that's my jam, right? Limitless, how to ignore everybody, carve your own path and live your best life. It's like, how to ignore everybody is the first part of that for a reason. It's pretty important. But it's so hard because it's ingrained in us, right? And, you know, we live in this society where we attach expertise. And I think it's important to attach expertise to, you know, doctors who have done the work and who know it. But there is a certain point where the doctors disagree with each other. And so it's got to then come down to you, right? And like, what does Mama Bear, what does your gut say? And I do think there are these moments where like Dr. Mom has to make a decision. Like the doctors are going to say, like, we've done all we can do. But is that always the case? I'm not sure. And so I'm sure that you work with so many families who have heard that we've done all we can do, right? Like, this is
no
it.
More options. There are no more
options.
You know, we did that campaign and hashtag no more options. It was in Times Square and we had all of the pictures of kids and families and parents who had written letters to their children or their sibling who had died because they had heard there's no more options. There's nothing else that we can do. And that's why I created Cannonball Kids Cancer. That's why we help create options for people to hear that. Like, that's not okay. I'm not okay with that.
Yeah, you know, you mentioned Brent Menswar earlier on the show, and I had him on a show about a month back. And by the way, I know you said there's no crying in Scotland, but he cried. He cried on my show. So, but he was told that, right? He was told, "I'm sorry, we can't help your son, Theo. There are no more options." And you know, last minute, long story, great story. If you're listening, go listen to that show. His story of Theo's life being saved was pretty incredible. And it's not to say that the medical community doesn't do everything that they can, but at a certain point, there's no more options based on the options that they know are available to them. And that takes that roar, that takes the fight, that takes ignoring what they're going to think about you. Like, so you're going to be a bossy bitch, right? You're going to come in and you're going to be a pain. But I do think that the squeaky wheel gets the grease sometimes. And especially in our healthcare system, you really have to be an advocate for yourself and the ones that you love.
When Cannon was diagnosed, one of the first things they told us was he's going to need this immunotherapy close to the end of his treatment. And if he doesn't get all of it, like, he won't make it. However, it's very, very painful. And so when they have it, sometimes they do have to switch it off because the body just starts reacting poorly to it. And that happened with Canon, and they said, we're going to switch it off. I said, no, you're not. And I stood in front of the machine and I said, you can go get your lawyer and I'll just wait. And meanwhile, you know, it's dripping through Canon. And I just, like, I wasn't going to accept that. Like, I don't accept it. You told me if he doesn't get this, he's not going to make it. So why am I going to let you switch it off? And I think there are so many families that don't do that, right? There are so many, but in life, like whether it's pediatric cancer or whether it's something else, like there are so many people who are, you can't be a doctor, you can't be this. I am the first person in my family to ever go to college, Laura. Like there are, you know, like there was no graduating high school. It was go get a job in the factory in the town where I grew up, right? Like, no, I don't want to do that. I want to do something else.
So I'm interested in this moment where you were like, well, okay, Canon's going to be okay. This was really hard. And also there are so many other families that are going through this. So I'm not just going to be home with my, what, now 3-year-old and year-old twins, or 4-year-old and 2-year-old. I'm not even sure when on the timeline this is. You're like, we're going to create a nonprofit. And it's going to be international, and we're going to help find hundreds of treatments for these kids, and you know, millions of dollars of, you know, research money. At what point, where was the Wonderhall moment when you were like, actually, there is more? Hey, honey, strap in. It's time.
I mean, you talk about that in Limitless, right? Like, what is your calling? What is your purpose? And for some people, it is like, what is a societal ill? Like, what is a problem? And I always looked at pediatric cancer as something that I felt people didn't understand properly, and not something that I wanted to shame people into understanding, but I wanted people to understand because I felt like if they did, they would help me, right? And so that's why I began saying, you know, do you know it's the #1 killer by disease? It kills more kids in the United States by disease than anything else. And if you combine all of the diseases together, it kills more than all of the big ones together. Like this, it is such a huge problem. And I just thought, like, let's start by educating people about that, right? Let's just start talking about it, get the conversation rolling. Everything we learn as we go, let's just start telling people. And then it was like, well, I'm such a lawyer. Like, I was like, I'm going to do a cross analysis of all the different nonprofits in the United States and worldwide that fight this problem. Like, what do they do? What's lacking? And so when we did that, we were like, research. Research is the one thing that we need more innovation in. So 92% of what we have done is the first of its kind. It has never been done before. There is no box at Cannonball Kids Cancer. We left that a long time ago, right? Like, we wanted to do things that were different. And that moment of wanting to change that was, I just honestly could not believe the state of affairs of pediatric cancer. Like, it blew my mind. It was not something that I thought before was taken care of. And I mean, can you ever have enough people trying to fight something like that? So I was like, all right, with everybody else, and we'll try to make a difference.
Why do you think it is? Do you think it's because children aren't voters? Do you think it's because
I mean, it's part, right? Like, I mean, about $250 million a year from the National Cancer Institute's budget goes to pediatric cancer research, like all of them, like all the hundreds of subtypes, the 12 primary. Prostate cancer, which the average age of diagnosis is about 70, gets more than that, one type of adult cancer. And so there is just such a disparity between how much children get and how much adults get, that again, it's like, all right, well, let's educate about that. Let's tell more people about that. But most of the money is really, you know, private nonprofits.
Do you find, is it easy once you tell people the story? Do they open their wallets, or are you still competing with so many other causes?
I don't feel like I think the world is noisy right now, right? Like this year, it's felt particularly noisy. It's easy to sort of get lost in the weeds a little bit, but I feel like when I have an audience, I I can portray what it truly looks like, and I can get people involved. I mean, we've funded in 25 different states, 3 countries now, and that is all because people have either been in the room or someone in the room has told them about it.
Are most of the people who come to you, they have had somebody that they know who's been personally affected, or is this is, you know, I there's part of me that feels like this would be an easier thing to fund because it's not controversial at all. And then part of me feels like unless this has touched you, it can feel like you can ignore it, right? It's like someone
Right, like
else's
it's not going
problem.
to happen to me. You know, I always bow down to people who do anything for pediatric cancer that have not been impacted, right? Those people, like I always say, I'm tired, you guys. Like I've done the battle, right? Like I've been in there with Canon. I've been to more kids' funerals than I have adults. I've held so many hands of children in their dying days, like, and it wears you. It is tough. And so I keep saying too, whenever we have ambassador training or we have people we're training, I'm like, you guys are the ones that need to take the baton and run faster, because, you know, we've been in this marathon for a while. And so I am always very encouraging of people who haven't been impacted in it, because I feel like they can truly make an impact, because they're saying, I haven't had a kid, but this is still not okay.
Do you ever just want to hide in a hole and not think
Yeah.
about it?
Yeah, I do that. I mean, sometimes I'll do like a social media detox where for like a day or two, just like I won't turn it on, because you can imagine what my feed looks like, right? It's sad.
Yeah, that's, I hadn't thought about that before. I mean, you know, my feed is filled with, you know, politics, and your feed
Right?
is full of probably politics too, because everyone's feeds are full of politics right
Yeah.
now. But where I don't have politics, I have, you know, Halloween costumes of like my friends' kids, and you probably
Mhm.
have Halloween costumes of your friends' kids that are in cancer wards.
I have pictures of signs saying, not this year, we're fighting cancer,
Wow.
right?
Yes, yes. It really brings some perspective, doesn't it?
It is a brutal battle. I mean, it is not pretty. And that is one of the things when I first started speaking, I used to say it's not the cute kid with the balloon and the celebrity, you know, the bald head. That's not what it looks like. I only wish it did, but it's
Yes.
not. I mean, I watched my son bleed out of every hole in his body. It's brutal.
You know, it's it occurs to me that a marketing campaign that's like, this is cancer, this is childhood cancer, would be difficult, but holy crap. You know, like I get outraged every October when all of the companies like pink out all of their stuff, and suddenly it's like, yay, we're gonna fight women's cancer, yay, breast cancer. And it's like, that's not what breast cancer looks like. Breast cancer looks like, you know, being raggedy thin, losing your hair, like bleeding out of every hole. I mean,
Yeah.
it looks like devastation to your bank account, to your body, to your family, and
Your mind. I mean, like
to
the
your
mental
mind.
toll of cancer on people, on families, on, you know, the number of parents who divorce after their child battled pediatric cancer. It's a lot.
Yeah, yeah. So the toll that it must take. So what do you do? How do you come back then from those moments? You do a social media detox, you don't go online, but you have these families that are, I mean, they're still texting you, they're still calling, like they're
Yeah.
still, they don't, cancer doesn't take a break.
It doesn't take a break. It does not take a break. And I do detox from it sometimes. I mean, I hate to say it, but the truth is, like, you do toughen up a little bit to it, right? Like, once you've been to a couple of kids' funerals, each one is horrific, but there was none that were as horrific as the first one, right? Like, it becomes like, you know, this is a part of it. I know, Laura, when I start helping a family or following a family or being a voice for a family, that may be where we end. And I do it anyway, right? Like, so I know that's part of the bargain.
Is it the majority that end that way, or the minority?
I mean, the statistics are, you know, they're very skewed, and we could spend like probably 45 minutes me just trying to explain some of that. But I think the important thing is when they do, it's survivorship isn't also what we think it is, right? And as a mom of a child who is now a survivor, I can tell you it's very unlikely, you know, he'll father a child naturally. Which, you know, adoption, lots of ways to do that. However, that choice was taken from him, right? Like there's just one thing that was taken from his choice box. You know, he has hearing aids. He's very, very short. He's the same size as his 7-year-old brothers. And then they told us, you know, because we've given him this treatment for 3.5 years, before the age of 40, he will most likely battle another cancer because of the toxicity of the drugs. Now, son alive or battling second cancer, I know what my answer is, but like I had to make those choices for him, right? So I had to, he doesn't have hearing, and he's not going to be able to naturally father a child because of choices I made for him, right? So there is some definite survivorship mama guilt that, like, you know, keeps you up at night sometimes.
There will be a moment, at least one in his teenage years, where he rages at you and says, "Why didn't you let me die? I'm miserable." And you're going to have to take that on the chin, and it's going to gut you.
Yeah. Yeah, there is.
Whew, that is, yeah. So is part of what you do with the parents talk about those survivorship moments and what that's like?
When you're in the battle, like, I don't think you want to know all of that as much as maybe you know now. We did do a campaign, This Is Treatment, which was about kids who were survivors. And it was all of the different issues that you don't see. You know, there was like a 13-year-old girl who still had to wear a diaper because she had lost the ability to do, and, you know, just there's so many things that are unseen from pediatric cancer. And I think my job is to educate people about what that looks like. If you don't want to listen, I always say, like, when it gets to September, I lose lots of followers. And my friends are like, "Are you serious?" And I'm like, it's fine. It's okay. We're going to be okay if we lose some followers, because they don't want to see it. And like, part of my brain, Laura, is like, I get that. Like, I can understand why you might not want to see it. But like, that choice, that isn't my choice, you know?
Absolutely. I mean, I feel like there, you know, we have the luxury, for better or for worse, to choose our inputs now, right? And we can let people talk to us about the things that we want to hear, whether we agree with them or not. And so I think, you know, I mean, I certainly find some of your posts to be difficult to read,
Right.
without question. I mean, they're real, and I have a huge amount of privilege that was not something I had to ever deal with, knock on wood, so far with my children. And yet, you know, I also feel like it's important to bear witness to the work that you do, and thank God that you do it, because I don't know that I would have the fortitude. I really don't know. I mean, I think that, and you know, what I also think is interesting is that you come to this as somebody who was working with the families, counseling the families. And I would imagine that there must have been, from time to time, a family that says, "Well, what the hell do you know, Melissa? Your son didn't die. Mine did." Right? Like, have you had those conversations where they've looked at you, and as much as they've loved having you there throughout the process, there's a resentfulness, there's a momentary hatred that you represent something that they lost?
I think, I mean, it would be unhuman probably not to have some of those feelings, right? Like, and I appreciate that. We were going to do this second campaign called This Is Treatment. I spoke to a lot of people who had lost their children. And I did that because I wanted to see if the campaign was insensitive, right? But the other part of me is, I can't not talk about it because I'm going to hurt a certain group of people, because the survivorship stuff is a real issue for all of the other people that are dealing with it. And so there was a lot of people who came to me and said, "Thank you for talking about survivorship," because the survivorship camp, it's like, we can't talk about it. Like, we can't say it's terrible. We can't say it's horrible because our kids are alive. But actually, we're doing a disjustice to the kids who didn't make it, because we're not showing what it really looks like if you do survive. And so that was my thought process, was I'm not going to not tell the truth about what it looks like because it's going to offend some other people.
Sure. I would imagine that there's probably, there will be people that'll be hurt no matter what you do, because this is a thing that hurts people. It just does. That's just what it is. So
you never want to think about children suffering ever, right? And we never want to think about the suffering, but then when we think there's something we can do to help the suffering that has not been done, it's almost like we can't look at that. Like, that's just, we can't. It's just too tough.
So so Cannon is surviving. You've got these twins. You have another son. We're not going to get to Charlie yet. We're going to talk about her in a few minutes. She's amazing. She lights up my Facebook feed. I'm madly in love with this girl. So you've got 4 boys. And you know, I've got 2 boys. They were 2 years apart. They were a handful. 4. Okay, that's a lot. And you're building this international nonprofit that is not just like an administrative task. It's like mental and emotional and like a full frontal. You've got to be there present all the time. Where does the reserve of energy come from with you?
I think, you know, when you feel like you can make a difference, that it just like it becomes like a part of you, right? Like I think, if I'm honest, I probably went too hard for a lot of years. I did the whole when they nap, when they go to bed, before they get up, and I did it and I did it and I did it. And then like I hit a wall when I was like, I'm like just completely burnt out. Like I have no more 3 a.m.s. Like I can't do it till 3 and get back up at 6 before they're awake. Like I just can't. And so I went to the board and I said, I want to hire an executive director. I want to hire a PR. And I want to have a team where their sole job every single day in an office is CKC 40, 50 hours a week. And like, that's it. And I am here and I will, you know, make sure the mission is being done and be an ambassador for what we're doing and speak. But I cannot do getting on a plane, you know, 20 times in 5 months. And you know how hard that is, right? Like getting on a plane and then come home, play mom for a couple days, and then get back and work on a budget for a board meeting. Like that, I just couldn't do it. And so we made a scientific advisory board. We made a governing board. So like I have a whole team that like covers all of the things. So if I do a social detox or a detox for a couple days, like it functions like unbelievably. And so now I'm more like, you know, like ask Melissa, or Melissa will come on and do training with the ambassadors. And I am not in the weeds as much as I once was. And I like that.
So that's a really good strategy, right? Like, what is the highest and best use of your time, and making sure that you do that. And you don't get distracted by all the rest of the like administrative stuff that someone else should be doing. And I think that's a really important lesson for people who are running businesses, for people who have founded nonprofits, for people who are just like, I think we get so wrapped up in the tyranny of the urgent that we forget what's really impactful and what's really interesting, and where only we can be doing that work. But the only we can be doing that work also happens at home. Like, was there a moment where your husband or your kids were like, Mom, yeah, it's really great that you're helping all these other families, but this family needs you? Like, what about the mom guilt?
100%. Yeah, there's no question. And I think that happened even with my family in Scotland. You know, it's like, you know, we have stuff going on too, Melissa. And, you know, sometimes you would hear comments like, well, you know, you're too busy, you know, sort of saving other families. And, you know, I would be lying if I said that didn't hurt, right? Of course it. How am I best useful? Like you said a minute ago, like how can I help the most people? And I do have this thing in me where I have to be careful because I do want to do that so badly. And I have to make sure that the family value is taken care of. And, you know, Brant Mainswar helped me with that, with his training. I started saying, well, how can I add family where it's not like once a month we're going to go for 3 days to Disney and I'm going to be the Disney mom and I'm going to do all that stuff. But how can I add a little piece of it into every day? And so I know, like, I take them to school in the morning, I pick them up, and I wasn't able to do those things for a long time because I was just traveling. I was just traveling like a crazy person and at hospitals all over the place and speaking. And now, like, I'm able to participate. And most of the time, you know, they're so excited to see you, but like 30 minutes later, they're like, you know, playing their card games or whatever they're doing. But like that little piece of time right at pickup where they're super excited about something crazy that happened at school that they only are going to tell you because, you know, boys don't talk. Like, you have to like literally like pull it out of them. I make them grade their day out of 10. And so like I'm always trying to get more information. I think I did need to do a reset on that. And I think I was failing my family for a long time where CKC was number one. That is true.
Yeah, I've always believed that a cameo appearance as a mom is better than a starring role. I've always believed that. So, like you, like I travel, for work back when we could travel for work. And like my rule was I would absolutely all the time pick my kids up from school twice a week, minimum. 3 was like what I was aiming for. 4 was maximum. I would never pick them up 5 days a week from school because I felt like when I picked them up every day, they didn't care. Like it was like they took it for granted. But that windshield time, the like driving home when you're not face to face with boys, when there's no, weird like subconscious evolution belligerence that they feel with the sort of eye to eye kind of thing. But your windshield time is the time, and then they're tired from school and they're emotional and it just all kind of pours out. There was a time when my husband was like, "Why?" Like, because it was kind of disruptive in the middle of the day to like go pick up your kid at like 3:30 when you're like in the flow when you're working. And he was like, "Why do you do that? You could pay somebody. You could get a babysitter, like get a nanny to do it." And I was like, no. It is the most inefficient time of my day. And it is also where I get my best mothering done. Like that's my money moment. I'm not giving that up at all. But, there is that guilt that comes along with it. But yeah, I realized that I had to just, to go back to your earlier statement about like the wrapping yourself in a blanket of what everyone else thinks about you. I had to redefine what motherhood was. So for me, motherhood also included building a strong business, being on stage, speaking, writing books, like helping people. Like I needed my kids to see that was part of it.
I gotta tell you, one of my kids said to me the other day, and this is how you know they're watching everything you're saying. And
everything.
One of my books was sitting on the table, Thankful for the Fight, and Aaron said, you wrote that like 5 years ago. Why have you not written another one? And I was like, oh, yeah, you're right. Like, I'm working on that. But it was like, they expect that of me, right? Like, they watch me work out. They'll come out in the garage and they'll watch me on the tread, or they'll be like, watch me do a handstand, or like silly things. But I think, I don't know if it's a boy mom thing or what it is, but I just remember thinking, I want them to think I am strong. Like that I am strong woman, and that someday if they meet a strong woman, if they decide to marry a woman, if that's something they want to do, if they do that they're not intimidated by someone who says, hey, like, I don't plan to be a housewife. That's not my jam.
Yeah, they see it all. They see it all when and they hear it all and they repeat it back to you when you least want it. And I mean, when I got the call to do my first ever public talk, which was TEDx Cambridge in front of 2,600 people, like I got the call and the woman was like,
for the first one, Lord have mercy.
I mean, it was like trial by fire, but like the woman called me up and asked me if I would do it. And I was like, no. And I hang up the phone, and my older son, who's now 18, this is like, he was 13 at the time. He was like, Mom, don't you tell me I always have to do hard things? Right? Don't you tell me if it doesn't challenge me, it doesn't change me? Yeah. Don't you tell me life starts on the other side of the fear? And suddenly it was like, oh, I have to do it because they're watching all of it. They watch everything. And that role modeling, I think you're right. Like, it's so important for boys to have good role models in their dads, but boy, it's important for them to have good role models in their moms too, because I think that defines the relationships that they're going to have, the relationship you have with each other. And then also the relationship that they're going to have if they marry a woman, the relationship they're going to have with that woman, because they get to see that, it's women come in all different sorts, and to respect to see the hard work that goes into it, to see how hard you work and why you care about what you do, and that empathy and that compassion and the grit and the tenacity and the determination that it takes every single day because this matters, I think is such a beautiful thing. So that
they're way smarter than I am. The other night we had movie night, and I was like secretly like trying to text on my phone, while we're having, and they're like, "Mom, you need to put your work phone away." And I was like, okay. I mean, like, they intuitively know mama works, when she doesn't, when I'm committed and present to them. And they are my biggest sort of check markers,
Yeah. Yeah. My kids called me out for texting while I was driving the other day, and I was like,
Yeah.
but it's really important. I guess
Yeah.
it's not, right? Like they were right. They're right.
Yeah.
So this brings us to Charlie.
Mhm.
So you decide, we've got 4 kids. I've got this huge nonprofit. My husband has a job that takes him out of town all the time. So I'm a single mom while I'm running this thing. Let's add another child to the mix.
I know. That's exactly what my mentor did when I told her. She was like, "No, we're not doing this. No, I'm not feeling this, Melissa." I wanted to adopt. My dad was a window cleaner. So growing up, I used to go clean windows with him in the summer. We used to clean this group home where there was all these kids in it who had no parents. And it like marked me up. Like, I remember thinking, like, imagine not having a parent, like, just like imagine that. And so when I met Michael 17 years ago, I said, I want to adopt someday. Like, that's on my to-do list. So I just need you to know that. And then when Cannon got sick and we had twins, he was like, "You realize, like, we're not adopting, right?" And I was like, "I don't realize nothing. I realize right now I'm fighting cancer," right? And so we talked during it and after it, and we said, if everything's good with Canon and we feel confident, we'll re-talk about it, right? And so we just kept talking about it like as if she already existed and she was in the back of the car, and like we'd go on trips and we'd be like, "Well, where will your sister sit?" and like joke around. And then eventually I was like, we should probably like call an adoption agency and like figure out how you actually like adopt a child. Like, I'd never got that far. And then on my 35th birthday, we said, "All right, let's go." And we called an adoption agency and we just sort of got the ball rolling. And boom, a year later, she was like, I was flying out to get her.
And I think you and I spoke right before you went out there. And I remember
We
you
did.
saying,
Yeah.
"What's going to happen? What if I can't do all this work? What if I'm not there?" And I remember you were very stressed out about how to manage all of it.
I was so stressed because it was my first time leaving my baby of CKC, right? Like, I was going away for a month. And
Yes.
I knew I would be all in with this new kid who spoke a different language in a different country. And I was told by other families, like, you can't be working when you're there. Like, that's not going to happen. And so I really was trying to prepare for that. But it was hard, right? Because, like, delegation is a skill. I am convinced of it, right? Like, it's a skill. And I think adopting Charlie was like one of the best things that ever happened to me. Like, it truly just like allowed me to see that CKC will exist forever. Like, it will exist. And if it doesn't exist without me and Michael in it, then we didn't do it right. And that was always my thought, was if we do it right, it will exist doing the mission forever, regardless of whether I'm in the center of it or not.
One of the best pieces of professional and personal advice I ever got, and I think we probably talked about it on that call that we had, was this: "You're just not that important."
Yes.
And I remember thinking, like, of course I'm that important. Yeah. Like, I'm building my business. I'm building my family. I'm building, these community organizations. Of course I'm that important. What do you mean I'm not that important? And what this woman said to me was, if you're building a thing that can't exist without you, then either you're a micromanager or the thing shouldn't exist because you're the only person who's keeping it going. But it was so hard to delegate. I mean, delegation is a skill. I think it's a superpower. It is something that I am very bad at doing because I'm a huge control freak. But the hardest part is when you delegate something and then it's not done exactly the way that you would have done it. I'm not saying it was done badly. It's
Yeah.
just not done exactly the way you've done it. So were you able to detach completely in Colombia, or did you
I
have to
truly
like?
did. There was a couple in the first week I was there when I didn't have Charlie. There was a couple things I did for the scientific advisory board while I was there. But yeah, I mean, once I got her, like that was it. Like the emails were not coming to me. I mean, they were like redirected so that I made sure that I was not distracted. And I really wanted to. I kept reading that like first month together was so vital for her and I to bond before I would come back with the kids. And I knew when I came back that it would be about trying to get them to bond. And so I just really like went all in. Like I wanted an A+ on bonding with her.
So what advice do you have to families that aren't able to put their work on hold in the way that you were?
To adopt, like if they wanted to adopt and they can't put it on hold. I mean, I think you have to figure out how. I think that there needs to be, if you want to adopt and you want to bond successfully with a child that you did not birth, who has lived in an orphanage and had a very hard life, then you have to be able to put something else second for a while. And if you can't do that, then maybe you should not adopt.
And Charlie didn't come healthy either, right? She also had some health struggles. So you had to, I watched, you know, on social media as Charlie went through 2 surgeries, I think it was, to have her skull. I know I don't remember what the name of the issue.
Stenosis. Yeah.
Which means that the bones of the skull fuse early, right?
Yeah,
so
like her brain couldn't grow. So they, like when we got her, like this part of her head was out here and this part was sort of missing. So they had to do 2 surgeries to reshape the front and then reshape the back. And they opened her up from ear to ear to do that twice. But the only reason why we were able to adopt Charlie was because we had gone through cancer. Like, do you know how many neurosurgeons I know? Like, I mean, I know more neurosurgeons than I do lawyers now. And so I was able to figure out and find out, like, as if something our family can cope with. And they said, oh, she'll be in and out in a week. And I was like, psh, good. All right, we'll take her. Like, we're good. Like, that didn't seem that difficult to me after 3.5 years of battling the way we did, you know?
So here was my question as I was watching all of this, and I was just desperate to ask you this question. So here's my question. I'm watching you go to Colombia, you adopt this baby girl, you're learning Spanish, she's learning English, you're learning to communicate with each other. And then she comes to the United States and she has to do something that's pretty scary, right? Going through these surgeries. And you're not exactly someone she's known her whole life, right? Like you've spent time bonding, she's gotten to know you, but still there's a like different school, different family, different kids, different, you know, house, like everything in her life changes. And then she has to go through this thing. How did you get to a point where either she had trust or she understood that there was no other choice? Like, talk to me about the process of getting her emotionally ready for this experience.
Yeah, I mean, it was very hard. Like, I mean, she was devastated to leave the orphanage. You know, she had lived there from 19 days old until she was 2. Yeah. And that's all she ever knew, right? Was that family. There was 50 kids that were there. Those were her like brothers and sisters. That was her family. And so I mean, it is like they had to almost like tear her away, put her in the cab with us to go home, and she was just shaking, petrified. And I remember that night, you know, trying to get her undressed, and like she attacked me, like flat out, like, you know, no way, girl, you're not taking my clothes off. And, you know, just things you don't think about that. Like the first time you have to undress them and put them in a shower, you know, like imagine what's going on in her mind. Like, who is this lady? And she's taking my clothes off and she's putting me in a shower. And again, that's why I knew, like, I probably read about 20 books leading up to going there. Like, I knew she needed me all in, you know, she needed me to be there the entire time and not take time away from her. And I would say that's probably the hardest thing I've ever done is being in 2-year-old that I didn't know 24/7. I don't want to be with any 2-year-old 24/7, let alone in a different country. Like it was so hard. I would take her to the hotel gym with me just so I could like move my body and like do something, because I think that was what was the hardest, was waking up. She was there needing breakfast, like going to bed. She needed her dinner. Like it was all me. Like I had no help, no friends. Like, you know, my husband was there for the first 2 weeks, but when he left and it was just me, it was brutal. But I think what that did for Charlie was, all right, this girl has my back. Like and she'll say, we're a team, Mom. We're a good team. We're a good team, you know? And so, and then COVID, like that was the best thing that ever happened to Charlie Wiggins, because she got all of our family together. We went to the lake for 13 weeks where I homeschooled the boys. And she was just right, you know, on my leg, like 2-year-olds are, you know, potty training and doing all the things. So she had an immense amount of time where she had all of her family and us together before she went through like some tough surgeries. And I think that was like vital.
That's incredible. You know, the lesson that I'm taking from this today is you got to show up. You got to show up for the people that you love, and you got to be all in for them, and they will show you the way.
Yeah. All in.
So this is amazing. Tell the people who are watching this live or who are watching the video can see all the URLs about how to find you. But for people who are listening for this later on podcast, tell people where they can find you and how they can get involved.
Yeah. So if you like crazy stories of, you know, working out at 4 a.m. and then the kids and then work and then all of the other things, you should follow my stories on Mama Bear Wiggins. That's my Instagram, and that's where I am most of the time. But I'm also on Facebook too, Melissa Wiggins. But I prefer Instagram, so that's where I am most of the time.
It is a lot less toxic of a place right now. And if people want to get involved in Cannonball Kids Cancer?
Yeah, cannonballkidscancer.org, and we have some really good opportunities coming up. We're pivoting to a virtual type gala next year. This year we had like 700 people in an airplane hangar, but this year we're actually asking our friends all around the country to host a dinner, a table in their house, all on the same night, April 24th. And so we're going to try and raise $1 million in one night all across the United States.
Well, if anyone can do it, Mama Bear, I know that it is you. That is amazing. Count me in. I'd love to be part of it.
Yay, I would love that.
Thank you for joining me today.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. Bye.